Zoom right before I tried to get in to this meeting, and I'm now on my cell phone. And being an older person, I'm not used to using a cell phone on Zoom, so I hope it's clear. And I will try to be I'll try to be efficient and try to give you a good feeling for why I think you should consider coming to UCLA. So I'll start off with a headline. I think, and I really believe this, that UCLA is really a wonderful place to go to college. And I say that because I speak to a lot of students who are current students, but I also look at a lot of reviews from students who have attended UCLA and have graduated. And I work very closely with alumni, and I hear stories from alumni who, in many ways, feel that this was formative in their life experiences and placed them in such a strong position once they graduated to get the kinds of employment that they really desired. So I think it's an incredible place for several reasons. One is the depth and breadth of academic excellence. You know, UCLA is among one of the very best research institutions in the world, and at the very top of public research universities in the United States. You know, sometimes there are beauty contests like US News and World Report, which place us #1, but really in many rankings, UCLA, because of the strength of its scholarship, of its educational programs, ranks very highly. So that's #1. Secondly, there has to be a reason why you decide to come to a big research university and not to a small college, because small colleges have lots of advantages. Well, one of the advantages of a big research university is the chance to perform independent research as an undergraduate. So that was my experience as an undergraduate. The reason I ended up getting a PhD was because, in fact, I worked in a research laboratory. I helped out. Initially, I did, sort of just very basic tasks in a lab, but eventually I took on some, independent research on my own, and worked with goldfish, actually, amazingly, training goldfish in a task. And that really whetted my appetite for going on in science. So I think that's one great advantage of being at a research university. The other advantage of being at a big university like UCLA is the fact that you can be part of many, many different kinds of student groups and organizations. We have about 1,200, and I'm right when I say that, 1,200 student organizations. So does two things, student organizations. One is it makes UCLA feel smaller because you join a group of students who are interested in the same topics that you are, and you make friends. And so student organizations are a great way to connect with other students, but also provides enormous leadership skills. And I always remember several years ago, I was in Seattle at an alumni event, and a couple of the alumni who worked for Microsoft, one was a vice president at Microsoft, said that, the courses were great and they loved being at UCLA, but they really learned their skills leading student organizations. That was actually where they developed leadership skills. So again, that's important. Why? Another reason to consider UCLA is that we're in a world-class city, the second largest city in the US, one of the most diverse cities in the world, and it itself is a spectacular place to be. I mean, it's now leading in the arts and music, has always historically been strong in music. The arts that now is incredible in this city. And the city offers an enormous range of diversity in foods and people's backgrounds. That's all very positive as well. And we make certain that there's ample support for students at UCLA. We really are committed to your welfare. We want every student to thrive here. We try to provide an equitable foundation for all of our students to make it possible for you to be successful at UCLA. So there's the chancellor's highly biased view of why you should go to UCLA. But I think I'm really being quite accurate in many of these points. And I think it is really a special place. Okay, what about being a place for transfer students? I think we do this better than anyone. I really do. We have more transfer students than any other UC campus, and it's built into the DNA of this institution. 1 in 3 students are transfer students. They represent bring enormous breadth of experience and diversity to this campus, and many times bring an adult viewpoint to the campus. Many of our transfer students have been out in the working environment. They've been in the military. They come back with a range of perspectives that really enriches the entire student body's life. I mean, that students who are directly straight out of high school have not had the same range of experiences, and those interactions are valuable for all of our students. So transfer students are essential for the greatness of UCLA. And we try to make sure that they're successful. And by looking at the graduation rates recently, they are successful. They can graduate and they move on to the same professional schools, and graduate programs and jobs that our students who began as first-year students. So I think in that sense, we're successful. And there's special support for transfer students, and that's important. We recognize that coming in the third year is not easy. And sometimes you're coming, or many times you're coming from a semester system to a quarter system. So we recognize this is going to be a challenge. So we have a number of programs that support our transfer students. Our Center for Community College Partnerships, obviously, the Transfer Student Center, the Academic Advancement Program, and Transfer Summer Program for low-income, first-gen, and underrepresented students. So again, really a portfolio of services or programs to make sure that you're successful if you come to UCLA. So I think it's a great place to go to college for everyone. I think it's a particularly good place for transfer students. I think our record demonstrates that you're going to be successful here, and you're probably going to give us strong reviews. Not everyone, of course. There's always an unhappy student, and we recognize that. We work to try to make everyone satisfied, but I think the vast majority of our transfer students, I think, feel they're having a great experience here. So then let's specialize a little bit. Why should you go? If you're interested in medical school, why should you think about coming here? And I get this question a lot. And I'll get this question often from students on Bruin Day when they'll say, oh, I've been accepted at Berkeley and I've been accepted at UCLA and I can't make a decision, what should I do? And I say, well, there's a real advantage to being in medicine at UCLA. And that's because on the same campus in walking distance is our hospital, our whole medical center. And our largest hospital, the Ronald Reagan Hospital, is right on campus. And that gives you a lot of opportunities. Obviously, the opportunity to do research, health-related research as an undergraduate, which is very helpful for recommendations, obviously. Shadowing, volunteering, and experiential activities. You can follow a doc around. See, because, I had a student in my lab, in my research laboratory, who decided to get a PhD, but he wanted to get an MD. And he left the PhD program. He shadowed a physician, actually. And then he rejoined the PhD program because he decided it wasn't what he wanted. But many students, that's exactly what they want. And they find that out by shadowing of people in the medical school and learning more about that. Plus, there's lots of mentorship opportunities because you have lots of folks in the health system here. That's a plus. We have very strong academic advising for our medical students. Career counseling through the Career Center, and a lot of student groups focused on every aspect of medicine. I think 100, and this is amazing, these numbers are always amaze me, 190 plus student groups focused on every aspect of medicine. I didn't read that wrong, 190 groups, including, as some examples, Bruin Medical Entrepreneurs, Sports Medicine Club, Latino Pre-Med and Medical Student Association, Melanin in Medicine at UCLA supports Black students in healthcare, Christian Pre-Med and Medical Student Association, just to name a few. So these are all the types of organizations you may want to join that can, again, get you ready to apply to medical school and give you the skills you need to wind your way through that, rather complex process of getting into medical school. And UCLA students seem to be really good candidates for medical school. So you always have to think, if you come here, what's your chance of getting into medical school? Is this a good place to go? And that's always a concern for students. They want to go to an institution that gives them the very best chance. So I'd say UCLA's medical school acceptance rate is up to 11% higher than the national average. So that shows that our students overall do very well in getting into medical school. And I talk to students about medical school, and I always tell them, I said, if you want to get to medical school, you'll get to medical school. Not everybody takes exactly the same direct course there, but my experience has been that, if you go to a place like UCLA and you want to be a physician, you're going to be a physician. So it's really impressive. And it's even more impressive because we don't restrict who applies to medical school. So in other words, some schools only allow their top students to get recommendations and move ahead towards medical school applications. We don't do that. Every student who wants to be a doctor, we are supportive of, and so our acceptance rate is really quite impressive. So that's all good. And finally, as was mentioned, many years ago, decades ago, I was a transfer student. I was at Foothill College, and I found the transition I was moving from a semester system to a quarter system. And in those days, you were able to transfer in 1 year, so I transferred in 1 year, and I found that challenging. But I also found my experience actually in community college was great. I mean, it gave me a grounding in confidence that I could do the work at a highly competitive school. And I found the transition after just getting used to, the quarters, which is just, a challenge for a while. I found the preparation excellent. And I would say that's my experience with when I teach classes with the students that have transferred into UCLA. They hit the ground, they figure out the quarter system, and they thrive while they're here. And they're resourceful because they have to accomplish this in all a shorter period of time than the student that starts in the first year. And increasingly, more and more of those students are now graduating in 2 additional years. So that's wonderful. If they spend a few years in community college and a couple of years at UCLA, that's ideal. That's the gold standard. But even if it takes a little bit longer, I think it's still a great accomplishment given the transition from one institution to the other. So I think, I can give you the sort of the general outlines here of my enthusiasm for why I believe this would be a great institution for you. But I guess now you'll hear from someone who actually knows the data. And this is Gary Clark, who leads our admission and enrollment management at UCLA. And Gary can give you the hard and fast data. I give you my enthusiasm. But thanks for inviting me today. And I stand ready for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Block. I think we're going to go right into my presentation versus stopping for questions of the Chancellor. Is that correct? If not, somebody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Go for it.
Thank you, Chancellor Block. As I was listening to you, I actually updated my slide presentation to get rid of a couple things that you covered much better than I ever could. So thank you for your remarks, and happy to be here with all of you today. So again, just by way of introduction, I am the interim vice provost for enrollment management, which means in that umbrella consists of undergraduate admission, financial aid and scholarships, early academic outreach, and strategic partnerships and community engagement. My deepest expertise is in the area of undergraduate admission. So I can talk generally about financial aid and reference some sites that'll be helpful for all of you. But my deep dive today is really going to be in the area of admission, how we evaluate students, excuse me, in the transfer admission process, and hopefully provide some tips and helpful information for you all to kind of follow. So I'm going to share my screen and excuse me, get into this presentation. So we always start, and I know we're not all physically on UCLA's campus right now, but we always start our presentations with an acknowledgement that the land that we occupy, that the original caretakers of that land were the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. So anytime we're talking about how great it is to potentially be at UCLA, we want to acknowledge that the original caretakers of this land were the Tavangar people. This is, I hope that many, if not all of you, have had an opportunity to experience UCLA's campus in person. I will put a plug in for any of you, whether you have or not, the ability to access virtual tours and virtual programming on college campuses is probably better now than it ever has been. And while any silver lining around the pandemic is a very thin one, I think it forced colleges and universities to really broaden and further develop those kinds of resources. So if you're not able to physically get to campus, there are a number of ways that you can engage with us and get to know UCLA on a deeper level through some of those programs that we've created. As the Chancellor alluded to, I wanted to start with just a couple of general points, and then I'll take my deeper dive into the admission process. Transfer students are incredibly successful here. They do very well. They come very well equipped. They add a richness and diversity and intelligence and ability to the undergraduate classrooms and residential campus here that I think makes the quality of education at UCLA second to none. Put us up against any college or university in the country. And I really feel that the presence of transfer students in our undergraduate experience, makes us, I think, a place that is truly second to none in terms of the quality of the learning that happens. Our transfer students persist. They graduate in a timely fashion. They have access to internships as undergrads, great opportunities for employment or graduate school after they graduate. So I think it is important to know that the students coming in, whether you're coming as a first-year student out of high school or coming in as a transfer student, if you're admitted here, you are equipped to be successful, and you've got the tools necessary to thrive and really contribute to this campus in some pretty incredible ways. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the academic opportunities, and especially focusing around major selection and the role that major might play in the admission process here. So as the Chancellor alluded to, we have quite a wide variety of academic programs for students to choose from. Over 125 majors and 90 minors. that students ultimately have the option to select from. And I'll talk about the role that plays in the admission process, but I want you all to know, and I will share this point, as we're talking around, opportunities to go on to medical school. Don't think that just because you want to go on to medical school means you need to study something in the sciences. That's not necessarily the case. I think more and more students are applying to medical school having studied something in the social sciences or the humanities as an undergraduate. What a pre-med program is going to be designed to do is ensure that you take the courses necessary to be a competitive applicant for medical school, anatomy and physiology, organic chemistry, things like that a medical school is going to want to see that you've taken as an undergrad. But more and more, I think medical schools are certainly conscious of kind of bedside manner, how doctors might connect with patients. And I think studying things, again, in the social sciences or humanities or other areas really speaks to, in many cases, your ability to establish those connections. So I say that not at all to discourage any interest that you all might have in the life sciences or the hard sciences, but to say that don't feel like you have to make a choice in that area. You've got a wide variety of options on the table, even if you want to go to medical school. So the way that UCLA is structured is we have the UCLA College of Letters and Science, where the vast majority of those 125 plus majors are housed. We have our professional schools, and then I'll talk about a little bit about some of the highly selective majors from an application standpoint that students might be applying to. These are our professional schools. Now here's where I'll start a little bit on some of the fundamentals of admission, but I'll go deeper into this later. Transfer admission is very much focused on major specific admission. When you're applying as a transfer student, you can't apply undecided. You have to select which major you're applying to, because each major has different major prep classes that need to be completed based on the major that you might be interested in. There are other requirements as well, but because you're coming in as an upper division student, you need to be able to jump right into that major, which means there are certain prerequisite courses that need to be completed prior to you enrolling at UCLA and jumping right into that major. There are a number of majors in each of these schools that students might be able to choose from, some of which only in recent years have started offering undergraduate programs, but again speaks to the wide variety of academic options that students might have to choose from. One of the things that I think is important to know, and I think there may have even been some questions around this, we are very committed to providing a residential experience for our students who choose to be a part of our residential community. And this past April, we were able to move towards offering a 4-year housing guarantee for our new incoming first-year students and a 2-year housing guarantee for our new incoming transfer students. So what that means is if you as a newly admitted student who chooses to enroll are interested in living in university housing, you're going to have the opportunity to do that for at least 2 years. And doesn't mean that we couldn't do a year beyond if that's necessary, but A, we hope that's not necessary because you're going to graduate after that second year. But B, there's the possibility, but we can offer the guarantee associated with those first 2 years. And again, I think being a part of a residential community means you're connecting with students both in and outside of the classroom. We do have housing available for students that might have families. To give them an opportunity to potentially live in some space that might be more accommodating. But for any of you that are thinking you really might want to be part of the residential community, know that the UCLA is committed to providing some of those options for our students coming in as transfer students. The Chancellor alluded to some of the resources and support provided by UCLA. We want all of our students to be successful and to thrive and to really connect with people that share their interests and their values. And so we have a number of offices and centers on campus that provide that support and help to establish that community and those connections. Two that I chose to highlight here are our Bruin Resource Center, which provides a wide variety of resources and support for the students that you see described here. And our Transfer Student Center, which is kind of your space. It's a space for you to go and just talk and hang out and get some support and ask questions. It's kind of a one-stop shop of where we can help direct you to other resources on campus as well that might be able to support whatever your needs might be. So I think this is, again, kind of reflecting UCLA's commitment to ensuring that all of our students here thrive and are successful and really find that community. I think that's an important part of student success for any student. So let's talk about the application process. So this past year, we received in the transfer process just under 25,000 transfer applications. That is actually slightly down from the year before, where we had just over 28,000 transfer applications. We saw that decline at UCLA. We saw that decline at the UC system. We know that enrollment at California community colleges is slightly down. So we are eager to watch the process this year with that November 30th deadline coming up to see how many students. Yes.
I just wanted to add one more data. 100% of people that don't apply don't get into. I think that's
that's a good point. Yes, absolutely. So you gotta apply to have any chance of being admitted. Absolutely correct. So I think we're certainly watching to see what those numbers look like and what the makeup of our transfer applicant pool will be this year. The admit rate this past year was 22%. The year before it was 19%. And to be perfectly frank, more often than not, you don't see admit rates going up. Oftentimes admit rates might be going down. But I will share with you that we actually increased our enrollment target for transfer students this year by a little over 350 or 400 students over the previous year. So we are committed, and all UCs are committed to enrolling at least one new transfer student for every 2 new freshmen. That is a University of California master plan system-wide kind of commitment that we want to ensure that each year we are enrolling at least one new transfer student for every 2 new freshmen. 94% of our incoming transfer students this year, the final number I think was 3,800 total students, came from California community colleges. So our commitment is squarely to supporting those students who are a part of our California community college system. Doesn't mean you can't transfer here from somewhere other than that, either a UC or a Cal State or a private institution or somewhere outside of California. It just means that you can see based on that percentage that our focus and our real, our real attention is paid closest to those students who are attending our California community colleges. So applying to UCLA, let's go through just some of the mechanics. So each year, the application opens on August 1st for students that are applying for the following fall. So right now, students that are filling out the application are applying for admission to start at UCLA in fall of 2023. The application opens on August 1st. You can only submit the application in the months of October and November. And it doesn't really matter when you click submit, whether you click submit on October 2nd or November 30th, that doesn't have any impact on when you're going to get your decision or your likelihood of being admitted. Just don't wait until 11:59 p.m. on November 30th. Don't do that. Laptops die, internet goes out, all kinds of crazy things can happen. Don't put yourself in that position of having to deal with that anxiety of, is everything going to work out at literally the 11th hour? Give yourself a little bit of a cushion and a window to make sure everything goes smoothly when you click submit on that application. You can start filling out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application beginning in October. That is due March 2nd. That's really the only form that we ask you to fill out to apply for financial aid at UCLA. The Cal Grant isn't something that you'll have to worry about, but those other forms are there for you. The January 31st deadline here that you see is we ask once students have clicked submit on the UC application for transfer applicants, we will ask that by the end of January, that you give us an update on your fall classes, what grades you earned in those classes, and then an update on what you anticipate taking either in the winter or spring, depending on what kind of structure your particular community college or institution follows. So we want you to click submit on the application, but we also want you to be sure to give us an update on your curriculum, the classes that you're taking, and the grades that you've earned in those courses for the fall, and an update on what you plan to take for the spring. I should go backwards a little bit and just remind you all. So the University of California has its own distinct application. This is one application for all 9 campuses within the system. You fill out the application. you input all of your courses. So you're going to tell us all the community college, all the college classes you've taken completely. Don't leave anything out. Don't it is critical that if you have taken a college course at any time, you need to report that class in the application. Even if you stumbled early on, let's say you started college, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't do so well, but now you're back at it and you're doing really well. You have to tell us about all of those classes. You don't get to just tell us about the recent courses that you're taking. It is important, and the application is very specific that you tell us about everything that you've taken. You'll have space to tell us about any challenges you might have faced or any explanation around grades or that type of thing, but don't just disregard things and say, okay, I'm not going to put that in the application. We do not collect transcripts at the point of application. We're asking you to self-report all of that information yourself when you fill out the UC application. And as I said, it's one app for all 9 campuses in the system. So you fill it out one time, you click which of the campuses you'd like to apply to, and then you click which majors you want to apply to at each campus. So it's distinct and different. And once you click submit on the application, all we're focused on is your candidacy at UCLA. We're not paying attention to where else you've applied. We don't care. It's all about your fit with UCLA and us focusing on you as a candidate for our campus. So we start the process of reading applications following that November 30th deadline. We don't really stop reading until we released admission decisions, which for transfer students is usually in late April. Not all UCs release decisions at the same time. So don't think just because you're hearing from one campus means you're going to hear from the other campuses at the same time. We generally release transfer admission decisions kind of in that last week of April each year. So know that that's probably when you'll hear from us, but you may hear from other campuses at different times, depending on what their schedules might be. If you are admitted, then you have until June 1st to decide if you would like to enroll at UCLA or wherever it is ultimately that you choose to enroll. Our process is very much a holistic process, meaning that when we ask you to fill out the application, and actually I'm gonna skip ahead here because this allows me to talk about these things. When we're evaluating the application, you're going to be asked to provide all of the information that you see listed here, on this screen. I've talked about kind of the grades and curriculum and classes that you've taken throughout your college experience. We also ask you to tell us about what you're doing outside of the classroom. And that could be very wide ranging. You might be active and engaged in things at your particular college or community college. You might work part-time or you might work full-time. You might take care of family members at home. You might be active in faith-based community or community-based organizations or, whatever the case may be. We don't have any value of any one of those things being better than another. I think what we just want to understand is what are you doing with your time outside of class? And we recognize, especially for transfer students, that can take a lot of different forms in terms of what you need to commit your time to outside of the classroom. So it's just an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about who you are outside of just your classes and your academic performance. We're trying to get to know you as an individual. Personal insight questions are another way for us to really get to know students. This is a chance for us to hear your voice in the college application, because here's something that UC is a bit different than other colleges and universities. We do not collect letters of recommendation. We do not interview students. So the only opportunity we have to hear your voice in the application is what you share with us in response to those personal insight questions. There are 8 questions. You choose 4 of them to respond to. One of them is predetermined for transfer applicants, and it's really talking about kind of your interest and preparation for the major that you've chosen, and understand a little bit more in depth why you've chosen to pursue the particular major that you've selected. But the other 3 are completely up to you as to which questions you'd like to respond to. And the best advice I can give there is just be authentic. Like this is not, an exercise in trying to think about what it is that we want to hear. I think we want you to focus on what it is that you want to say. What do you want us to know about you? What do you want us to know about how you think, about what's important to you, about what you spend your time on? These are the things that really help us to add that third dimension to the application of knowing a little bit about who the individual is, behind all these other things that we're seeing in the application. This is not about circling misplaced commas or correcting grammar. Like, we want it to be well written, but really this is more about that kind of student voice and hearing and getting to know you a little bit in that evaluation process. I'm going to go, back to the top of the screen here and really talk about what are the things that is really probably most critical in the transfer application review process, and that is completion of major prep. And earlier I dropped a link into the chat that is a link to a publication that we produce called the Transfer Admission Guide, which essentially is a list of all the majors available for you to apply to at UCLA and what the specific required major prep is for each of those programs. To be eligible for admission to the University of California, there's what's called the 7-course pattern of classes that students need to take. That's described in that publication as well. 2 courses in kind of writing and English classes, a math class, and then other kind of college prep courses in other discipline areas, much of which will overlap with other things that you're taking as well. When the reason that we hold so closely, and the reason why that each major that you'll see listed in there has varying degrees of requirements associated with what courses need to be completed for that major, is because of that point that I shared a little bit earlier. And that is, we want our transfer students to be successful. We want them to finish in a timely fashion. We want them to be able to hit the ground running when they jump into those upper division courses at UCLA. And to do that, the faculty have said, we think students need to come in with these courses already completed to be able to really jump right into these upper division classes. So that is really important. That is something that I think, we look very closely at, and, lack of completing some of those major prep courses is something that I think would make admission to those majors, fairly challenging. Now, we recognize that access to some of these courses can be challenging, which is where assist.org can be really helpful. That's the site that you use to determine which courses at your community college or at another community college, maybe near you or something, might have those courses available that articulate to those particular classes that are required at UCLA. So you'll really use that publication and the assist.org site kind of hand in glove as you're taking classes, scheduling your classes, and ultimately applying to UCLA. So what we're looking for is obviously students who have done well academically, students who are earning strong grades in those classes, especially in those major prep classes. And again, we're looking at patterns and we're looking at long-term, so don't feel like if there was a stumble early on at some point that's going to predetermine your admission outcome. I think we want to hear about that context. We want to understand what those circumstances might have been and really add that kind of holistic review that goes above and beyond just checking boxes or looking at numbers as it relates to a GPA. These things I think I've already kind of talked about in terms of the importance of what we consider in the admission process. Certainly, as I've said, preparation for the major is critical. I will mention one program here because I saw a question about it in the chat. UCLA has a program called the Transfer Alliance Program, where we partner with community colleges throughout California and the honors programs specifically in those community colleges, and look closely at students that are applying through that program to UCLA. In general, for students that are applying to UCLA, we only look at first choice major. So you're applying to a particular major and we're evaluating you for admission to that program, to that particular major. For a student that is a part of TAP, and these are only specific community colleges that have those honors programs and that we have this partnership with at UCLA, we can consider a second choice major. And there are certain majors that can be listed and considered for that second choice, and then there are some that cannot. But what would be required is if it turns out for a student that is a part of TAP that has applied to UCLA and we are not able to admit them to their first choice major, then they would have to have the major prep completed for whatever that second choice major might be as well. So I say that just because that is just based on a long history of that partnership and that relationship that we have with those honors programs at those community colleges. So there is that added benefit for students that are participating in that of us considering a second choice major. For other students, for every other applicant, we're really looking first and foremost at that first choice major and considering you for admission to UCLA under those particular major prep requirements and that process. Okay, just a couple more slides here, and then I see the Q&A number climbing quickly, so we'll get to some questions here in a second. I mentioned earlier about applying for financial aid. And to apply for financial aid, you only have to fill out those forms that I shared a little bit earlier, FAFSA being chief amongst them, or the DREAM Act application. I think UCLA is really committed to partnering with students in terms of financial aid. We want to ensure that we're doing everything we can to maximize grants, which we like those because you don't have to pay those back. Work study, which means you might work in an office on campus and earn some financial aid dollars that way. And then loans, which we don't like a lot because you do have to pay those back over a number of years after you graduate. But we really think that UCLA is a worthwhile investment, and college in general, I think, is a worthwhile investment for students. So we're going to do everything we can as an institution to put our resources to support your enrollment at UCLA, and hope that we can look to students to partner in whatever way they are able to help support their own education as well. Finally, there are definitely ways to connect with UCLA and specifically with undergraduate admission, and a couple of these links that you see here will connect you with those folks. So each community college in California has an admission representative from my office assigned to that community college. So if you are from a particular community college, you can connect with somebody on my staff and ask any questions that you might have. If you're curious about any events that we have coming up on campus, you can go to our events page. If you want to get data on kind of what the profile looks like for students, we make that publicly available as well. The links I shared earlier, those two publications, all are a part of our publication library. So those are available to students as well. STEMP is an incredible student organization on campus that really focuses on recruiting transfer students, but also, again, creating that community of currently enrolled transfer students at UCLA. These students actually partner closely with us in doing some outreach and engaging with prospective applicants. They do an incredible conference each year where they bring anywhere from 14, 16, 1700 plus students to campus to take them through a day at UCLA and provide a lot of sessions and so forth. STEMP is an incredible organization, all volunteers. So for those of you that are maybe ultimately going to enroll at UCLA, I'd encourage you to consider getting involved in STEMP. It's a great group. Assist.org is that site that I referenced a minute ago. Transferology is a little broader. Assist.org is really specific to the three systems in California: California community colleges, University of California, and the California State University system. So everything there is really built around those three systems. Transferology is a little broader than that. It gives you a little bit of background on how other courses might have transferred, in past years, if you might be coming from a place outside of those groups. With that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I can certainly go through and read the Q&A myself, or
we'll ask you. All right. We've been monitoring it and answering them. So
I was hoping you'd say that. So yes, what kinds of questions can I answer?
There's actually a couple of questions to the chancellor. They wanted to know, how did you adjust as a transfer student at the university level?
So, when I went to school, there was not much help. I have to be honest. All the programs that we have today didn't exist. So I actually transferred to Stanford, and there were not very many transfer students at Stanford. But what was helpful was other students, and I guess that's true today as well. I mean, there were other students I met who had transferred, and we sort of were a community because we were living close to one another. And that was the most helpful thing, I think, was advice from other students. We have much more, as was mentioned, we have many more programs. So I think the experience what I experienced, I think would have been today unusual, because it would have been a lot more assistance. So I think we're much better positioned to help transfer students make that transition.
There's another question for you. Is I wanted to know the resources that can take advantage to help people adjust to the quarter system if they're accepted to UCLA.
So, Mr. Herrera, I would actually look to you. Probably you're better equipped to answer that than I am. I think is STOMP one of the programs that would be most helpful. I'm just trying to think of our most helpful programs for that transition.
Yeah, I mean, well, Alfred, are you going to jump in? No, you go ahead, Alfred, and I'll jump in after you. You're muted.
Conversations with current students is always the best way to see how they handle it. And I think Madeline can provide some perspective. Making sure that you stay on target, stay on track, know when your deadlines are, know what you need to do when you need to do them, and always ask for help. There are lots of different support programs. Gary mentioned, or the Chancellor mentioned the Transfer Student Center. Gary also, I think Gary did. Anyway, there are students all around there to help you adjust to the university. And there are support services. So stay connected, ask a lot of questions. You're not alone. There are so many students that are dealing with the same kinds of issues. There are a lot of workshops that are run through the Transfer Student Center, the Bruin Resource Center, the CAPS Center, the RISE Center, and all these acronyms that you'll know nothing about until you get to UCLA, but there's some meaning behind that. And it's really to make sure that you have tremendous success while you're at UCLA.
You heard it from the expert. A lot of programs, and I know that we're all there. We're all here to support you.
This is another question, and I know that you have to go, or your assistant is going to be mad at me to keep you longer.
Right.
And I don't want to make them mad at me. So the one last question is, a lot of people say if you go to University of California, you learn theories and not actual applicable job skills. Is that true or not? And since you're in the community as well, for where UCLA graduates, and how would you respond to that?
So I would disagree with that at several levels. So one is, it depends on job skills. So the real question is, are you prepared for a job when you leave as an undergraduate? So in some areas, there's simply no question about it. In engineering, engineering is really a professional degree. If you're in the engineering school, when you graduate, you have all the skills to be an engineer. So that's clearly a case where you, same as nursing, of course, you can be a nurse and you have all the skills required. That's true for some other areas in business, economics, and areas where you really do have the skills. Many of the other areas I consider liberal arts degrees that give you broad education, that gives you the capability of switching careers. What it gives you is the sort of intellectual power to be able to switch careers. You may need additional training, and that's always a challenge. You'll have to be prepared to either go on, pick up a master's or a certificate, because some of those degrees prepare you broadly, but a degree in history probably itself may not be sufficient for some jobs that require additional job skills. So that's where you would pick up additional training. Many of our students go on to additional professional and academic advanced degrees. That said, one thing we're working on is to see whether it's possible to do two things. One is create more bachelor's, master's programs that within, let's say, 5 years, you get an undergraduate degree that might be more liberal arts and a master's degree that's more applied. Give you an example: biology and biotechnology, a master's in biotech, music and music business, combining, or history and commerce, master's. So there's ways maybe of combining bachelor's, master's in a shorter period of time. That's one possibility. The other possibility, which we're working on, is trying to offer more certificate programs through extension. So your final year, let's say your final year as an undergraduate, you also pick up a certificate of proficiency in business or in management technology or data sciences. So I think what I'd say is that as an undergraduate, our goal is to give you a broad education, make you totally capable of changing careers. And in some cases, we have very specific education as an undergraduate, like engineering. In other cases, we prepare you to learn more, and we'll try to provide other opportunities for you to pick up all those requisite skills.
I would agree. And the only thing I would add to that is that, a college degree is reflective of an entire undergraduate experience, not just the classroom experience. And so absolutely, I agree with what the Chancellor said, but I think part of what we want to offer to students as well are opportunities for internships. We have an incredible career services office that wants to engage with students the second they step foot on campus to connect you. You know, we have employers and companies and organizations coming to campus for job fairs and internship fairs all the time, because we want to be sure that the experience you're getting in the classroom is complemented by some of those very practical, you know, internships and things like that, that the whole sum of your degree at UCLA is reflective of that entire experience that you've been provided, which, you know, as I said before, we would put up against any college or university in terms of how it prepares you for whatever comes next, grad school, employment, whatever path you might take.
And I would just add, look at some of the very successful entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, and you'll see that they actually had undergraduate degrees, I think, in English. And, you know, it's just humanities actually can prepare you for a set of powerful professions. So I think I would agree completely. I think between that and all these other activities that you can engage in, I think you can be well prepared as an undergraduate to enter the job market.
And then the last piece that I'll add is the analytical skills and the writing skills you get from a university like UCLA will prepare you for any job out there. That's really important to have.
Absolutely. So I have to apologize. I want to thank everyone for attending. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I hope you all apply to UCLA. I hope you're all successful in getting into UCLA, and want to thank you. And unfortunately, I've got to catch a flight, and getting to LAX is never so simple. So I'll
Thank
stop
you
here.
again.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
again.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
Madeline, do you want to go?
She might be frozen.
Okay. This one, will college courses that are taken during high school need to be included in the transfer application?
Yes, if they are going to show up on a college transcript, they absolutely need to be reported. So yes, and that's where I say, don't, like, when in doubt, report it. Like if you've taken a college class at a college or university or community college, you should report that in the application.
This is we get a couple of nursing questions, and so this one is, I'm a nursing major who has UCLA as their dream school, but I was discouraged at the significantly low acceptance rate for transferring CC nursing majors. Should I change my major?
No, that's a really good question, and a tough question. So it's a practical and kind of philosophical one. The reality is, you know, nursing is just a very small program, and it is super competitive at both the freshman and the transfer level. You know, they enroll, you know, maybe in the neighborhood of 40, you know, freshmen each year, and maybe 15 or 20 transfer students each year. So it's competitive because it is so small, and it is so small because there's so much one-on-one attention. There are practicums, you're shadowing nurses, there are certain facilities that have to be available for some of the training that's required as a part of that program. But if you want to study nursing and you know that's your passion and that's what you want to study, then you should absolutely apply for it. Because if in that decision of like, okay, I know I want to study nursing, I just don't know where I'm going to study it, versus I know I want to be at UCLA, maybe nursing, there's the decision balance there of whether you should really go for it. Like if you know that you want to study nursing, that's a goal. As competitive as the program is, I would encourage you to apply for it, because here's the reality is that, like, even if you were to, you know, come to UCLA in some other major, could you switch into nursing? You have to be accepted into that just as any other student. And because of how tight their cohort model is, as it is now, really isn't a lot of space that opens up for current students to potentially move into nursing. So I think, assuming that the level of interest in nursing is very high for the student that posed that question, I would encourage you to apply for the major.
I would add that we've been fortunate to have a couple of our scholars in our program be admitted to the UCLA School of Nursing over the last couple of years. And Gary's right, it is an extremely tough major because of the small numbers of students that they admit. And so one of the best things you can do is get connected to them right away. They are available. Mark Corwin is the undergrad advisor, and they're available to talk to you at any point and to know exactly what you need to do, and look at their website, look at the prereqs for the major, look at your campus, and just stay engaged as quickly and as closely as you can throughout the process.
Yeah. I'll add kind of two quick points to that. Number one, and I should have said this earlier, nursing is one of the majors that has a supplemental application. So when you're applying to UCLA, all the things I described in that process hold here. But if you're applying to nursing, theater, film, and television, arts and architecture, or music, then in addition to the UC application, there is a supplemental application that you have to fill out and submit directly to that school. It never comes to my office. We don't see it. It goes directly to the faculty in that program. And as a part of evaluating students for admission, in addition to what we do in our office, they are looking closely at what the student submits as a part of that supplement. And it can be very different things. In the School of Nursing, it's more narrative. They're trying to understand your understanding and commitment to the field of nursing. You know, and others, it might be a portfolio or an audition of some kind or that kind of thing. So when it's those programs, again, nursing, theater, film, and television, arts and architecture, or music, there's a supplemental application that you have to fill out and submit, sometimes very shortly after that November 30th deadline. So be sure you look in advance and know exactly what's going to be asked of you as a part of that supplement and when you need to submit it. The second point relative to that is kind of major selection in general. And I talked about how, you know, kind of highly selective majors and that type of thing. You know, when I first got here, and this has shifted a little bit, but when I first got here about 10 years ago, I think it was the case that 70+% of our students applied to 12 majors. Okay, I remember I talked about 125 plus majors. The vast majority of students were applying to 12 of them. And I think part of that goes to the question that was just asked of the chancellor a minute ago, and that is this idea of kind of pre-professional preparation. That if I want a career in business, I need to study something with the word business in it. Like I need to apply to business economics or economics if I ever want a career in business. Taking nothing away from either of those majors. They both are extremely competitive because they are both very highly applied to. And there are lots of other majors that you could study as an undergrad and go on to have an incredible career in business. So when you're thinking about what you want to study, you know, think broadly, you know, and you know, we've got publications as well that talk about kind of major versus career, like really thinking about what you enjoy studying and not necessarily thinking in just a linear way of how that's going to prepare you for a career, because, you know, there are lots of us who, like, I got a political science degree. You know, I am not a politician, at least not an official one. Like, I think it's, you know, there are lots of things that you can study that, as, you know, Alfred said earlier, are going to prepare you from a critical thinking, writing, communication standpoint that are going to prepare you for lots of different careers. So think broadly about the majors that you might choose to apply to.
This is a question. Did you know your freshman year in college that you were going to be the vice provost? Or
I did not. Not at all. I mean, and that's, I think, I think a reflective story. And you know, Alfred, you know, and Madeline might have similar kind of thoughts in terms of how that has evolved for them. Like when I came, I was the first person in my family to go to college, you know, and I went to a college that was, you know, half hour away from where my family lived. I really didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated. I changed my major 3 times as an undergrad. And I don't think that's actually an outlier. I mean, I think that happens quite a bit. You know, I think when I was an undergrad, I worked in offices on campus throughout my undergraduate program. Like I worked in the registrars, I worked in student life, I was an RA. Then I worked in admissions, I was a tour guide, and I was in the admission office, like presenting to families. And I love the idea of kind of demystifying the admission process because I didn't get it. I went to a big public high school. You know, I met my high school counselor one time. It wasn't memorable for either one of us. You know, and I just landed in a place that turned out to be the right place for me. But I wanted to be part of kind of demystifying that process and really trying to speak in a very clear and transparent way, you know, with prospective students and families. So I chose this career after I graduated. I knew this was what I wanted to do when I graduated from college. But did I know it in college? No. You know, again, I thought I might work for state government or local government or something like that. You know, this is something that really I found that inspiration during my undergraduate program. So maybe that moment hasn't come for you yet, but it will, you know, and I think that's part of the journey.
yeah, and I also, since people are asking a lot of nursing, I put a link in the chat. The School of Nursing, you could actually make an appointment, one-on-one appointment for 15 minutes and ask them any question on Zoom. So you don't have to drive anywhere. Put the link, you go on there, you could sign up. I think they have appointments available next week, and you could ask them all those detailed questions because it is such a highly specialized field. And so I think they would be the best people that you could ask him. This is a question. Actually, no, you had one about, go ahead, Madeline, with the TAP one.
We have a lot of questions about TAP, the Transfer Alliance program. So I was wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit about what TAP is and how it impacts students' chances for transfer admission.
Sure. I mean, I can talk a little bit about the admission process. And Alfred has been a part of and engaged in TAP for a long time. Anything you want to share before I jump in?
I would just say that any opportunity you have to get involved in an honors program like TAP is really important, because it gives you not only the opportunity to be in a cohort-based program, but it also gives you opportunity to get research. And research, as you know, at the university is one of the things that's really important. So TAP students who get certified, and Gary can talk more about that, but basically it's you complete the requirements of your college honors program, get connected to our campus in a number of different ways, and have opportunities to engage with students and programs. So if you have if your college is part of TAP, look into it immediately. You can't take some of the classes and get the benefits of being certified. You have to take whatever their requirements are. We don't set the requirements, they do. We honor the requirements they have and use them in our process. So it's important to get that information early enough so you are able to take the courses that are available through TAP.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, I think we want to, if your school happens to offer and be part of the Transfer Alliance program, you need to really be actively engaged in it. It's not just I'm in honors, therefore I'm a part of, TAP. You need to actively engage with the honors counselor at that community college to make sure that you're doing all the things that are required of not only the honors program, but to become TAP certified in our process. And I think it's, as I said, it's just kind of a longstanding relationship that we've had with these honors programs throughout California, that the students coming out of these programs are very well prepared. They're very successful. They do quite well at UCLA once they enroll. And so it's something that I think has been a partnership that's been beneficial both to us and the community colleges over the last many years. But even if you're not at a community college that participates in that, like our review process is really going to be the same. Outside of that one part of not being able to consider a second choice major, we're evaluating you and looking at your application, in the same way. So if it's something that is an option that's available to you, maybe consider getting involved in that program, not just because of, the TAP aspect of it, but really because of the preparation and support that you get being a part of one of those programs.
And then the one was besides completion, this is more of a general EOPS, but besides completion of general education, major preparation and grades, what else can enhance profile of students that are in EOPS and, to attend a highly competitive university such as UCLA?
Well, I mean, I don't know that there's anything additional that I would say that students need to do to kind of quote stand out. Like I think the thing that makes students stand out in any college process is again just that point I made about authenticity. I think certainly we're very upfront about the fact that like the academic work that you have completed is the backbone of your application. We are first and foremost looking at the quality of academic work. The classes that you've taken, the degree to which you've met major prep and taken those that 7-course pattern that I mentioned earlier, and your performance in those classes, because that is one of the things that's going to be most indicative of student success on our campus. But otherwise, we really just want to get to know the student and understand a little bit about who they are, what environment they live in, where they come from, like what are the opportunities or challenges that they might have faced in their educational career. And we're trying to consider that context in the overall review process. Like this isn't, in both the freshman and transfer process, we don't want this to be a completely numbers-based process. We want to really understand who the individuals are behind these applications and understand that sometimes that academic performance might have come in spite of some pretty significant challenges that a student might have experienced. And so how do we account for that and understand the impact that had, and also thinking ahead to how we can support those students once they enroll. So like I said, I think it's just about telling your story. Don't try and shoehorn yourself into this image of what you think a college is looking for. It's about telling your own story, sharing your own experience, and allowing us to really consider that in the review process.
Yeah,
And
I would like to add, one of the most critical things, as Gary said, is be authentic, be who you are, and tell that story. Don't let somebody else tell the story for you. Don't let somebody else tell you what you should write on those PIQs, because they really speak to who you are, and select the ones that are the most, that would provide the most benefit about you and your experience as a student or as someone in the community. And we always tell students to select several of them and start writing on them, and you'll find the ones that kind of pull you in and using those as the most important ones for your application. And make sure that you include those things. Sometimes students say, oh, I don't know if I should tell them this. If you question it, tell us, because it's obviously important to you. So make sure that you do provide enough information. Remember, the application details are all there. We know the GPA, we know all of that. This gives you the chance to say, this is who I am, and this is what my experience is. And if you don't tell us, then we don't have anything to go on. So it's really important to do that. Run it by many people so that they can give you some feedback as well. We have opportunities to engage with students from UCLA. Your community college has opportunities. Really important to share it and get the information so that you get the best you can do.
Good advice.
And can you just touch this on, and I know that Mr. Harab mentioned it, but can you tell the importance of the PIQ questions and not start doing them at 11 p.m. on November 30th?
Right. I mean,
how important those are, and to make sure that it's grammatically correct. And
yeah, I mean, I think the point there is really, at a lot of colleges, they might ask for like letters of recommendation, or you might have an opportunity to do an interview. You have some other way to kind of talk and converse and tell your story in the application, in other capacities. And that's not the case for the University of California. Like you don't have a letter of rec where somebody can kind of share context and tell us things about you that you're not telling us. It's self-advocacy is kind of the name of the game here. Like you've got to be the person to tell that story. And I think, the advice I give students sometimes is really just like print out the questions, hand them to a friend or a counselor or colleague or somebody, and have them ask you the questions out loud, and then just answer them. Hit record on your phone, or just kind of verbally out loud answer the questions. And that's kind of what we're after. It's not this overly contrived, leave the thesaurus on the shelf. Like, it's about writing in language that you're comfortable with. It's about being authentic in what you share in that response. And I think that there's no reason why you should wait until the last minute. I think you want to be thoughtful about it. You want to write it and put it down for a couple of days and come back and look at it and be like, all right, is that what I really want to share, and that kind of thing. And yes, we're not going through this like we're grading an English paper. And again, I don't want to say that, oh, well, just, don't worry about punctuation. Like, just, yeah, I mean, it needs to be well written. We need to be able to follow it in terms of what you're sharing with us. But I think the focus for you as the student writing it is, think about building a case for your admission. As Alfred kind of said, like, all right, they know these things about me. Like, they know my curriculum and my grades and these things I'm doing outside of class, or how many hours a week I work, or that kind of, but what don't they know? Like, what are the other parts of me that if I don't tell them, they're not going to know? And help us to fill in some of those blanks, and again, that's, if you can feel like at the end of writing your personal insight questions that you've accomplished that goal, then you will have done a good job on your responses.
So we have a lot of questions about withdrawn grades or low grades. And if you have a couple of C's or a few W's on your transcript, will this impact your chances for admission?
Well, I mean, I can't say that it won't impact your chances of being admitted, but I can say that having some W's or having some C's or something like that is not inherently going to dismiss you from being considered and potentially being admitted at UCLA. I think we see that students will repeat classes sometimes, and that's great. You know, we want you to report that to us if you've had the opportunity to retake a class. And I think we also look for patterns, like when did those grades occur? If there are cases where you may have had particularly problematic terms or classes in the application, there is an additional academic information section. And if you want to share with us any circumstances that might have impacted your academic performance, you can utilize that space to do that. You know, so yeah, I mean, look, I can't sit here and tell you that academic performance doesn't matter. It does. You know, like, so yeah, the more lower grades you have, that's going to have a negative impact on your chances of being admitted. But I'm not going to go as far as to say, you know, if you're not batting at a 4.0 or 3.8, you got no chance, because the data shows that's not the case. You know, we are looking specifically by majors. We're looking at major prep. We're looking at patterns and grades. We're looking at, you know, all these things that come into play in the evaluation of a transfer application, above and beyond whether you just had, you know, a handful of W's or a low grade or something like that. So no, I mean, I think, you know, control what you can control now. You know, like, focus on doing well this fall, focus on doing well in your next term, focus on completing the major prep courses and the classes that you need to take to be considered. Can't control what happened in the past. You know, all you can do is really focus on how you're doing now, and know that for us, we're really going to try and look at that long-term trajectory of a student's performance and understand some of the challenges that they might have faced along the way.
Yeah, and I would just add also, like, think about going to community college as like minor league for baseball or soccer, that you're just getting your prep, you're getting good at it, and then you go to the next level, and then but you have to have, you know, have some consistency, and you have to show that you're able to compete at that level, and it's doable. A lot of people do it, and so, but just look at it as preparing, learning how to study, learning to learn content, and then going to the next level.
And we have one question. Do students who have completed all major prep coursework for their major have an advantage over those who have not?
Well, so the answer to that question, when it comes to major prep, generally what we're saying, and all major prep, is that it needs to be completed by the spring term. So if you're applying for fall 2023, it's okay to have some major prep in progress in spring of 23, but we expect that all of that major prep will be completed by the end of that spring term. However, there are a couple of majors where we really want to see that major prep completed by fall. And business economics and economics are two particular majors, to some degree psychology as well, that we really would like to see that major prep completed by the end of your fall term. So for students that are applying for fall 23, that are applying to biz econ and probably psychology, we would say that major prep really needs to be completed by the end of this fall term for you to be competitive for admission to those particular majors. And again, it's just because they are so highly applied to and so competitive for those particular examples that we want to see that major prep completed by the fall. By the end of the spring, otherwise is fine, but I would say try not to, whenever possible, put too much of the major prep in the spring. If you can do it in a more gradual way and build up to knocking some of that out where possible before that last term, I would encourage you to do that. Because one of the things, admission, like getting the admission offer, is an important first step, but it is not your last step. You know, getting the admission offer means you need to maintain what you've told us you're taking in the spring and complete those courses at the level that got you admitted to begin with. Because what can happen sometimes is students in that spring term drop classes, maybe don't do well in classes, and especially if they're major prep, that can be a really critical issue in terms of maintaining your admission and enrolling at UCLA. So I think as much major prep as you can complete prior to the spring is going to put you in a better position not necessarily from an admission standpoint, but in terms of the maintaining the admission offer standpoint, because you don't have so much of that hinging on that last spring term.
There's a couple of questions about international students transferring from community college, and they're wondering if they are equally looked at. Would they have access to the TAP programs, and also financial aid for them as well?
Sure. So I'll kind of chunk that out a little bit. International students can participate in TAP. Access to financial aid is going to be much more limited for international students. Unfortunately, most of the financial aid we can offer is going to be for either California residents or students who are either U.S. citizens, permanent residents, or DACA students. We're not really able to provide a lot of aid for international students. That said, in terms of the admission process, UCLA and all of the UCs have a cap on the percent of non-resident students that we can enroll at our institution. So the cap is 18%. Right now, UCLA sits slightly above that. So we're at probably now about 21%. And at the time that the 18% cap was put in place, we were kind of already above it. We were told at the time we could stay there, but now the state has come back and said, actually, you need to reduce down to that 18% threshold. So over the next several years, we're going to slowly draw down on the number of non-resident students that we're enrolling each year to ultimately get the overall undergraduate enrollment to that 18% non-resident cap. I say all of that because each year we're given specific enrollment targets associated with freshmen and transfer and California residents and non-residents. We don't have specific international targets. We just have non-resident targets, which means students who are not California residents. It means they could be from out of state or international. This year, our enrollment target for non-resident students in the transfer class is about 380. Compared to the California resident enrollment target, which was closer to 3,700, somewhere in that range. So it is a smaller target. We're reading applications, in the same way, but it does sometimes make it inherently just more competitive because the number of students we seek to enroll that are non-resident students is significantly smaller than the California resident target. But I will say that the vast majority of in the transfer process, the vast majority of our non-resident students that we enroll are often international students who are attending California community colleges. So that's where a lot of the non-resident number comes from for us.
And one question that's coming up often is it possible to transfer to UCLA from another UC or another four-year university?
Is it possible? Yes. When you look at the percentages for us, in terms of our incoming transfer students, about 94% of them came from California community colleges. So that means essentially everybody else makes up 6% of the enrolling transfer students. I think last I looked, it tends to be around 3% of that 6% comes from other UCs or California state campuses. And then the remaining comes from everywhere else. Maybe that's private universities in California or any institution outside of California. So without a doubt, we are squarely focused on California community colleges in terms of where most of our enrolling transfer students are coming from.
They want to know, some people that applied out of high school, they didn't get in or chose to go to a community college, would they have access to that application?
No, I mean, when you apply as a transfer, you're starting fresh. Like we're not looking back at if you applied as a freshman or what was in that application. Like it's a total fresh start. So we're not looking at any old application data. We're looking at just your new application as a transfer student.
Okay. Somebody else's, my community college recommends that.
I think the other thing to question there as well is if I've applied previously as a transfer student, will my application be reviewed in this current time that I'm applying?
So again, I mean, we are going to look at your new application and consider you, and just in terms of what you've shared with us in that new application. I mean, of course, UC is always going to have record of whether you applied in the past, but we're not looking back at that information, and that previous decision doesn't have any impact on what your current decision will be on the active application that you've submitted. So not being admitted previously, whether it's out of freshman or transfer, is not going to have any detrimental impact on your likelihood of being admitted in the current process.
We also have another question about taking more than 2 years at a community college. So will it hurt a student's transfer application if they took more than 2 years at a community college?
No, not at all. I mean, that's, it all shapes and sizes. Like, some students have been taking a class or two at a time for a long time. Some students have been away for a while. Some students are going full time and applying after, a year and a half out of high school. So no, we don't have any preference there. There's nothing negative about the amount of time that you've been at a community college. There is going to be an upper threshold in terms of how many units you can transfer, because they're lower division units, but no, that's not going to, that doesn't have any negative impact on the application.
And you don't give a
The
preference.
national average, sorry.
Sorry.
I was going to say the national average is over 2.5 years that students take to transfer to a university.
Yeah.
And you also don't give preference to Southern California community college students versus Northern.
No. I mean, California community colleges, yes, but preference as to San Diego, LA, Northern, Central, like, no, we don't have any preference there.
So this is a question I'm going to ask Mr. Clark, because there's like a lot of them that are kind of the same thing, and we get this question a lot from the deans of admission for medical schools. Everybody's asking, so if I have really good grades and I do well on my application and do all my requirements and majors and I get my TAP, what is the secret sauce? What else can I do to increase my chances? This is kind of the secret sauce question, that there's some sort of like insider trick or handshake or anything else. Is there anything out there that you would want to share with people?
There really isn't. I mean, honestly, and I think the challenge that you face, especially in highly selective processes, is the volume of students who are qualified and have done all the things, whether it's, major prep and performance and all those things, often far exceeds the number of spaces we have to provide, and so it's difficult sometimes to know what are the things that are making the difference, so it's all those things I talked about, but then ultimately it's just us really reading the application and trying to get to know the student. I mean, the challenge of answering that is anything I say, everybody is going to write down, like, all right, we love when students tell us about blank in their personal insight questions. Oh, okay, well, let me do that. It's not about finding a trick. It's not about finding, any one little hinge or mechanism that's gonna make the decision go one direction, or another. I think it's just preparing yourself as best you can. I think it's doing well academically, taking those courses, controlling the things that you can control. And then I think, honestly, it comes down to really having a good list of colleges to apply to. I love UCLA. I would love all of you to apply, and if you're admitted, to enroll here. But I think it's important, as you're going through your college search, to make sure that you have some campuses, UC and otherwise, that you really feel confident where you're going to be admitted. Because then I think you can really take the temperature down in the process a little bit. You can know that I'm really hopeful about these 1 or 2 places, but I've got these other places where I'm really pretty confident that I'm going to be admitted, and I'd be really happy at those institutions as well. I think that, take a deep breath and heaven forbid, actually enjoy the process if you can really build that strong list of schools that you might be applying to.
I think one question we have a lot about is regarding IGETC. So is fulfilling IGETC requirements mandatory for transferring?
It is not. I mean, it's a good idea, just because I think it certainly can help to satisfy, general ed requirements, but it's not required for admission to UCLA for any program.
The other question is, I'm majoring in biology and I have a great fear of not getting into a highly selective major. What can I do to stand out, avoid the possibility that I don't get in to biology?
I don't know if there's an answer to that question. I mean, I think it's just, yeah, that's the reality. And again, as we talked about with nursing earlier, like I wouldn't discourage the student from applying to biology if that's what the student is really interested in studying. And then just do well, take the major prep, be thoughtful about your PIQs, like be authentic in what you share in the application. All that advice still holds there. I guess the only thing I would say, and I'm completely inferring this and could be totally wrong, if the student is choosing biology because they think I got to do that for medical school, but biology really isn't their passion, then certainly there are other paths. So if the student is doing that because I feel like I got to do biology if I want to do pre-med, I would say disconnect those two things from one another. But if the student really does enjoy biology and that's what they want to study, then just go for it. And again, I mean, you can't control the outcome, but it's something that you just pour yourself into the application as best you can and see how the decision comes out.
I do want to add a little bit, just as somebody who's gone through this transferring and being a biology major. General biology does have a lot more applicants than the other more specialized biology majors. So I personally majored in molecular cell and developmental biology, which has fewer applicants than general biology. So I would encourage anyone who's a little bit worried about how selective general biology is to look into those more focused majors. And they typically have less applicants. They're still very selective. But I think it's a good avenue to look into.
So somebody asked a question about the difference between a major versus a career.
Well, I think it's really more the idea that if I want to have a career in blank, then I need to study something with that same word in the undergraduate. Now, there are exceptions. You want to go to a career in engineering, you're probably going to need to study engineering or physics or math, but there's a lot of, like, if you talk to a room full of, people who are in professional roles now and ask them what they studied as an undergraduate, you'll often find that what they majored in is not directly tied to what they're doing as a professional right now. And I think we remind students of that because I think sometimes there's the perception that, like, again, to my example of like business and I got to study business, and the flip side of that coin is like, well, I don't want to study English if I'm not going to be like an English professor or an English teacher. And that's not, I think, the right way to think about it, because the skill set you develop, the critical thinking skills, the writing ability, the ability to understand literature and connect ideas across disciplinary lines, these things, especially combined with some of those experiences you'll have outside of class and internships that you do and that type of thing, are going to very well prepare you for whatever comes next for you after UCLA. So I just don't want students to think that anything that might be more humanities oriented or social sciences, that you can't connect an exact career with that, means that somehow you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's not the case. Our students and the reputation of UCLA is such that there are going to be people that are interested in hiring you because they know you've been well educated, at an incredible institution. And what you study might be a secondary question because they know whatever it is that you're studying, you're going to be well prepared and a skilled student who can learn quickly in whatever environment you might be dropped into. And I remember, it's been years where you talk about, like, you're not just preparing for the job you have right after you graduate. Like, your undergraduate degree is designed to prepare you for what happens 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and there are careers that don't even exist yet, that you need to be prepared for. And the way to prepare for that is critical thinking and communication and writing ability and research and things that kind of force you to kind of flex these intellectual muscles that are going to make you very marketable and effective in any career path that you might choose.
One question we have is about the limited number of transfer units. Does it matter if students have taken more than the maximum number of allowed transfer credits? And then is there any way for students to know which credits will be the ones transferring over?
Well, there's no detriment from an admission standpoint. I mean, in terms of knowing what transfers to UCLA, that's where assist.org is helpful, because that gives you the blow-by-blow account of all the courses that you might be taking at community colleges and how they're going to transfer to UCLA. So you're not going to be penalized for having an abundance of credits, but we're just going to go through and look at the courses that are most academic in nature and those major prep classes, and that's going to be helpful in the review process. But no, it's not going to hurt you.
And then we have a question about double majoring as a transfer student.
Let me add something there, because we get this question a lot. And it's the idea that if I have 90 semester units, you're only going to take 70 of them. Can I select which of those 70 are going to be used, et cetera? And the answer is no. The answer is all of the courses will transfer in terms of credit for whatever areas that you need it for, and general education, but the GPA will be factored in a total of all of those transferable courses. And so we won't just look for all the A's or look for all the C's and all that. Anything that's transferable will be used to compute your GPA, and then you'll get credit for whatever courses are required for pre-major, IGETC, or any other area, or you'll just get general transfer credit. So you can't pick and choose. The only area where you could do that is generally in like physical education, where they have a maximum of 4 units and you've taken 8 units, then the admissions office will select those courses that best benefit your application. So, but generally all of your community college courses are going to count in that way.
Thank you. Going back to the question about double majors. So for students that are planning to double major once they transfer, how does that process work? Should they apply to one major and then later petition to double major? Or
yeah, so you're always admitted to one major. That's the reality for any, freshman transfer, you're admitted to one major. If you're interested in adding a second major, then that's a conversation you probably start at orientation, and you talk to an advisor on campus in that department about potentially adding whatever that second major is. Can you double major? Absolutely. Sometimes certain majors play better with other majors than others. Some depending on the amount of time you have to commit, if it's like a lab oriented major or science or something like that, might not be as pliable sometimes with a second major. I think minors are a great option for students as well. I think a lot of this comes down to time to degree. And adding that second major or a minor and how that impacts your time to degree. So certainly we want students to have the ability and flexibility to do that, but we also want to do what we can to support you in graduating in a timely manner.
And the other piece of advice there would be, if you think you're going to do that and you want to do that, then you should make sure you take the prereqs for that second major while you're in community college, so that you could have the possibility of doing that. And then again, remember, selective majors don't generally allow for that to happen. So it really depends on the major. It's easy in some cases and not possible in others.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is hypothetically speaking, is it possible for transfer students to create their own majors after their acceptances or switch their majors while at UCLA? Or doing an interdisciplinary major or
Yeah, I mean, I think that is possible. Yes, that's one of those things that I think if you're thinking you might want to do something like that, that is a conversation to have right away. Because again, we're trying to focus on supporting the student in time to degree. Here's the language we use around changing your major, and we're intentional about this. you should expect to complete your degree in the major to which you are admitted at UCLA. And the reason we say that is because are there cases where there are majors that you can switch into? Potentially, yes. There are some departments that would be happy to have a student in that major. There are some majors, however, that you cannot switch into, and we don't want a student to kind of think or anticipate that they're going to be able to switch into, especially if it's one of these more competitive majors once they enroll, because the reality is they might not be able to do that. And I don't want, an unhappy student on campus that isn't studying the thing that they really wanted to study the whole time. So yes, there are some majors that would welcome students who might be interested in that either as a second major or potentially changing, but we tend to use language with admitted students and publicly that says you should really expect, especially as an incoming transfer student, to graduate with the major to which you were admitted.
Let me add about the designing your own major. It is possible. It is challenging. It can be done. I actually have one of my former scholars who graduated from UCLA last year and is now in the higher ed program at UCLA, who designed his own social justice education major prior to us having the education major at UCLA. So it's possible. And I just need to know what it is you want to do. You need to research the courses that are available, because that's really the critical areas. There has to be courses in the area that you're thinking about to be able to combine these things to make this new major. Takes a lot of work and a lot of research, but it can be done.
Yeah.
So the
sorry.
other question is, can you talk about how important your grades in your spring, after you apply in the fall, how important your grades in the spring are going to be as well?
Yeah, I mean,
You got to look at that as well.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, it really is. And I think, and I say the same thing to freshman applicants as well. I think, the idea, sometimes the temptation is, it's you think the goal line is getting admitted. No, the goal line is after you're admitted, maintaining your admission all the way through to the fall. So I think absolutely, students need to, and that's why that we call it the TAU, the transfer admission update, that I shared the slide, and you complete that usually by the end of January or in February sometime. That tells us about the classes you and grades you earned in the fall, and then obviously what you're taking in the spring. I think it's important because, I mean, there are all kinds of things that we have to consider. Your total number of units. You need to make sure you meet whatever that minimum unit threshold is to maintain your admission. If there's any major prep, the quality of the work that you're completing and the grades that you're earning. So spring is very critical. And I will say this as one additional kind of plug on that. And I don't want this to sound negative, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind. If you are admitted and you choose to enroll, and you do have any issues that come up in the spring, whether you have to drop classes or withdraw from some classes, or you get poor grades in some classes, tell us right away. There is a form inside your decision portal where you tell us exactly what's happened. Okay, here's the change in schedule, here are the grades, here's an explanation as to what happened. Do not skip that and cross your fingers and hope that we don't notice when your transcript comes in. That's a bad idea, because we are going to notice. And by the time we get those transcripts, you got to think about, we're bringing in a class of about 10,000 students total, many of whom have multiple transcripts that we have to process. And we don't always get those transcripts on time. By the time we process that transcripts or those transcripts that we get in the summer, if we're in late July or early August, and there are some problems there that you didn't tell us about, I will feel bad about rescinding your offer of admission, but we'll do it. And I again, I'm not saying that to sound hard-hearted, but I'm saying it that if you tell us early and give us an explanation, there might be a conversation we can have about, okay, either that's okay, or maybe there's some summer classes that you can take or something like that. There is no conversation to be had like that if we're having that conversation in August. So don't do that. Like, just be upfront, tell us about it, give us an explanation, and then we can engage in some dialogue as to what our options might look like.
I cannot stress the importance of that. We hear from students sometimes who don't do that, and then in July they're telling us, oh, I never told them. It is really critical. I can tell you that admissions has been really helpful if they know right up front to try to, they want to keep you there. There's no reason they want to deny you. So if they know right away, they can work with you to try to work this out, but you got to tell them right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a couple questions from students that are wondering what they should do if if some of the major prep courses they need are not offered at their community college.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there are a couple of things. First, if that is the case for you, you can look at some other options at local community colleges. I think now, especially with more online courses being available, there might be some options for you to take those courses online. But we also understand that sometimes it's just challenging, if not impossible, for students to get some of those critical courses. Tell us about that in the application. If there is something that you don't have access to, and we try to monitor this as well. We have an understanding of what's offered at community colleges and try to take into account sometimes lack of access to particular classes. There are especially some majors with some very specific classes that are not widely found at lots of community colleges, and we certainly try to be understanding of that situation. So when in doubt, just tell us in the application that you're having a hard time accessing that class or it's not offered at your community college, and we'll do what we can to really take that into consideration, because we know in some cases some of these courses are really not as accessible depending on where you might go to a community college. And I maybe have time for one or two more questions. I apologize. I don't want my son to be sitting out on the curb. I got to go pick him up shortly. So maybe one or two more questions if that's okay.
Mike, there's another question too, is some people are asking about, are some majors, do you have a lottery? Some majors, apparently people are asking about, you can only apply once you're at UCLA, like human biology. Is that, I didn't know that, so.
No, so there's no lottery. I know sometimes the decisions might seem random. They are not. There is no lottery system for selection to any major, but sometimes you just have such a high volume applying and such a small number that are admitted. It might seem that way, for a student. They're at the transfer level, students are being admitted directly into the major. There are some cases at the freshman level where a student, like communications is an example. You can apply to communications as a transfer student. You can't apply to communications as a freshman. You can apply to architecture as a transfer student. You can't apply to architecture as a freshman. But no, I mean, there's no lottery system. I think it's just there are certainly some majors that are quite a bit more competitive than others. They're all selective, but there are some that are certainly more competitive than others.
Let me just mention that I put in the chat the link to the admissions representative for the California Community Colleges that Gary mentioned earlier. Obviously, there's a lot of questions that are not going to get answered, but you should reach out to that person because they visit your school either virtually or in person and can help guide you as well through this process.
Right.
I have one question for you, Mr. Clark. How does the admissions council look at classes that were taken pass, no pass, or those that were taken online?
So that's a good question. I'll answer the latter first. In terms of online, we don't know. When we get a community college transcript, it doesn't distinguish whether the class was online or in person. So we're not assigning any value as to the method of teaching associated with the class. In terms of what was the other part of that question? It was about online versus
Pass, no pass.
Pass, no pass. So pass, no pass, I think there was a period of time where, especially due to the impact of COVID, that we were quite understanding and would accept, pass-fail classes that could be applied to either general ed or major prep classes. But it was a finite period of time where that was the case. We are no longer in that time, and it's on our website. It's in, publications. The Office of the President even puts a site on that says during this window we would accept pass fail grades that could satisfy some of those major prep classes. But if it's outside of that window, we expect that the class has been completed for a traditional letter grade. Okay, that might need to be my
Yes,
last
absolutely.
question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
This was great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you. Thanks for dropping the link to our staff in the chat, Alfred. So if you all have any questions, please do connect with whichever member of my team is assigned to work with you. Alfred and CCCP have a lot of great resources as well. So thanks for the invitation. Hope this was helpful.
Thank you very much again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care.
We could have a bunch of questions that Mr. Herrera could answer as well for a few minutes. What's the meaning of life? No, just kidding. Do honors classes help or hurt you, or help you or increase your chances of getting into UCLA?
The only way honors classes benefit you in the admissions process is if you actually are part of the TAP program and get certified and complete the requirements that your community college has, because then they give you preferential consideration. So they look at that. And as Gary mentioned earlier, you get an opportunity to select a second choice major, which general applicants do not. If you take a class, an honors class, or say 2 or 3 classes, and that is not part of an honors program, or you take classes with a program that is affiliated with UCLA but don't complete them, there's no benefit in the admissions process. The benefit is you're in a class that is structured differently, that has an opportunity for you to engage with a professor and to do research. So there is benefit in doing so. It just won't be in the admissions process at that point.
So people are asking, do extracurricular activities like being a president of a club improve your chances of getting into UCLA?
That's an interesting question. The application process includes the PIQs, which gives the student an opportunity to provide information about who they are in a variety of different situations, whether it's specific information about majors and preparation, whether it's community, whether it's leadership. All of that information is important because it's a holistic review and they're looking at everything that the student presents themselves with. As I said earlier, the application, the detail of the application, GPA, courses, etc., is like the frame. What you write in those PIQs is like putting the picture there so that they can see who you are and learn more about you. If you are a president of an organization and that's all you're doing, that's not going to benefit you as much as all of the other kinds of things together cumulative are. If you've been in an organization for a number of years, it's much better than just saying, I'm in 25 different organizations right now. But you have a long-standing history of being involved in different things. Many students can't be in organizations because they work. And so making sure that you indicate that information about working is important because that's a leadership skill as well. If you're a parenting student, that's important because you're juggling and struggling in some cases with going to school part or full-time, working part or full-time, taking care of your children or your family full-time, and being able to balance that out and still do well is really important. So you need to make sure that all of those pieces are part of your puzzle, if you will, to make sure that we can see the complete student and what's important.
Some people want to
beneficial.
I'm sorry.
Would it be beneficial to talk about activities that you did in high school during your transfer application?
Not necessarily. And I say not necessarily because we really want to know what you've been doing for the last 2, 3, or 4 years that you've been in college. Stuff that you did 3 or 4 years ago, unless it's like incredible.
Winning the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
Malala.
It's more recent stuff that is really important. If you feel it's important to you and it needs to be there, then I would say do it. But know that, you know, if you did everything in high school and nothing in between, it's not going to look that great.
So this is another question: is being a in CCCP, does it improve your chances, or do you have an inside track to get into UCLA?
Well, if I say no, then what am I doing here, right?
Can I answer that one?
Sure.
So I would say that it gives you a community of people that are like-minded, that are motivated, that are successful, that you have access to people on your own campuses around LA, and also being part of a community, you get to know the insights, you have opportunities, you know about those opportunities sooner. So I don't know if it's, you know, I think it does, but
Yeah, thank you for that. It does. And let me give you some statistics here. Gary mentioned that the admit rate this past year was 22% of students who apply to transfer that get admitted to UCLA. The admit rate for students who are part of CCCP and apply is almost 50%. So that in fact is part of the conversation that we need to have. If you're in an honors program that has a certification with UCLA, the agreement, then it exceeds 60 or 70% of the admit rate. So these programs do benefit. One of the things about CCP is that we're not just trying to get you to UCLA. If you want UCLA, great, we want you there. But if you want another campus, we're also willing to help you there. And our admit rate for students going to universities exceeds 90%. So our goal is to get you transferred, period. And that's really what we're trying to do.
And does CCCP have any programs for students that are currently in community college?
All of our programs at CCP are for students who are in community college. We just a very brief overview. CCP provides an opportunity for students who are low-income, first-gen, underrepresented students who are in local community colleges to participate in a variety of activities and webinars to help prepare them to become more competitive to the university. We have partnerships at about 12 community colleges locally. We work with students across the state. Now with this, with the whole COVID situation, we've gone down to, we've been able to expand our options because we're doing a lot more webinars. If you're interested in CCP, you can go to ccp.ucla.edu. I put the link in, and I know Aaron's in there, and Melody, if you can put some of my staff, you can put the link to CCP in there, that would be great.
I've already put it like 3 or 4 times.
Great, thanks, Juven. And so, yeah, we really do want to, we have programs that are targeted for specific identities. So we have a program for African-American students, Native American, Pacific Islander, STEM students, undocumented students, parenting students, formerly incarcerated, system impacted, foster youth, and on and on and on. So we have a lot of different programming that we provide through the lens of that community, which gives some more solid information for students from people from their own groups.
This is a question from Madeline. How did you figure out you wanted to go to UCLA, major in biology, and this person's thinking about genetics, and their first-year community college student?
Yeah, I just saw that question. So Jubin just posted a link in the chat that breaks down the average GPA per major and the number of applicants per major. So I touched on this briefly, but if you are interested in biology, something that I heard from advisors is that it is helpful to focus on a more specialized major. I picked that one because of my classes I had taken. It was what I was interested in. But there are a lot of different breakdown. There's molecular or microbiology, immunology. There's different class programs that you can take. So I would definitely recommend looking at that link that Jubin posted in the chat, which is the transfer GPA by major. See which ones you're competitive with, which ones your GPA aligns with, but then also just pick what you're interested in. That's a great thing about UCLA. The different classes in the life sciences group is just that there's so many different options for you to find what you're really passionate. Maybe you like ecology, maybe you do like microbiology. Just look into those and see what really fits with the things you've been interested in. So that I just picked it because it fit with me.
You know, I can't stress the importance of that enough, because so many people think that I have to be biology. Biology is the major that you have to have if you want to go to medical school. And med school, I mean, you've heard it here, Jubin said to you before, they don't only admit biology students, they admit students from everywhere across the curriculum. But it's really important to find your passion. And there are, you know, because you only know biology, that maybe you're thinking your only passion, but explore and find out while you're in community college, because the chances of being admitted to biology are smaller than being admitted to some of the other areas. And you're doing much of the same curriculum and you're headed in the same direction. So increase your chances by opening your mind and thinking about other kinds of majors that will get you there.
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions about medical school, and that's awesome. But we've had like 22 deans of admission from UCLA, Stanford. They could tell you all of this information, and you just have to go on our YouTube page and watch it, because they've answered a lot of these questions. So some of them were not like, it's not that we don't want to answer, but you know, they've answered it and it's recorded, and it's better to hear it from them directly than, you know, us second, you know, hand. And so, and I always say, like, I'm not here to give advice, just information. So yeah, so I would say I would just add that to it. Somebody else wanted to know, does CCCP does programs in person?
We are moving back into an in-person modality. So we will be, this year, we'll be doing a combination. We will be doing some programs at UCLA. We'll be doing some programs at the community colleges that we are partnering with. And then we'll also be doing webinars and workshops online.
Okay, and then this is another medical school question. So yeah, so I would say just go to our website and you go to our YouTube page, and you could see every dean of admission from every California medical school that's talked. Somebody asked about what are the percentages of somebody was asking about dual enrollment students. How do they looked at it? They looked at freshmen or transfer?
Dual enrollment, meaning students that are in high school taking community college courses.
Yes.
So if you are taking community college courses while you're in high school, and let's say there are some students that complete a 60 units or a transfer degree while they're in high school, you still apply as a freshman. You apply as a freshman until you apply after you get a degree. So if you're doing this before you get your high school degree, all of that, you still are considered a freshman applicant. You will enter the university as an advanced standing student, meaning you could come in as a junior. But because you are doing this before you get a high school diploma, you always have to apply as a freshman. If you do it after you get a high school diploma, then you need to wait until you have 60 units. You cannot transfer to UCLA as a sophomore. You will have to do the 60 units and be a junior at the time of application.
So somebody said that they wanted to join CCP, and do they have to submit the application in person or online?
Everything's online. If you go to the website, the link that Jubin posted, you can get information. Our application is there. We require you to submit a specific application, which is a very short application. And then also you need to complete the UC TAP, which is the Transfer Admissions Planner. Someone also posted in there a long time ago about TAP, TAG, TOP, and all of those things. And it means different things at different places. But we require students to do the UCLA Transfer Admissions Planner, TAP, to be part of our program. So you can get all the requirements on our website. And there's a phone number and an email that you can send to, and we have students and staff that respond to those daily.
Yeah, and I put that link in the chat too.
Thank you.
The other question was yeah, so again, people are asking about what are my chances with a 3.85 GPA. I think pretty good. I'm not sure what major it is, but again, all of that information we posted in there, so you can take a look at that.
One of the things that I will respond to, because we get that question a lot, is GPA is important, but if you have a 4.0 GPA and no preparation for the major, you'll be denied. It's important to make sure that you couple that GPA with the requirements for admissions and the requirements for the major that you're applying into.
Can you also tell them again how the PIQ essays are important? I just wanted to retouch that again because we're getting a couple of questions again for that.
Yeah, as I said previously, the application data that they have on your GPA and your courses and how many units you have and all of that stuff is important. But the PIQs paint the picture of who you really are. And they provide the information that you can't see by looking at the courses that you've taken. So they don't talk about maybe some challenges that you might have had over the course of your academic journey and what you've learned from them and how you've overcome any of those. They don't talk about why you select a certain major and why it's important to you and what your career goals might be. They don't talk about the passion that you have for a certain area or any experiences that you've had in travels or in your community. They don't talk about the leadership that you've had. So all of those things are you're able to address by completing some of the questions that are part of the PIQ. You have an opportunity to choose to have seven options, and you will get, I think it's 3 or 4 now. Choose those that will best benefit you and your story. Because I always tell students, think of it as if you're able to sit down in front of somebody, an admissions person, and tell them why they should admit you. This is that opportunity. It gives you the information. It gives them the information right there by reading those 3 or 4 different PIQs that you've completed. Very, very
important. To build on that, just one related question. Would it be okay to talk about a personal disability in your personal insight question?
Absolutely. One of the things that's important is if you have had a disability that has hampered your ability to do certain kinds of things, that's important for them to know. And if you don't say anything, we don't know it and can't consider any of it. If you do say it, talk about what it's done and how you've overcome that, not necessarily the disability, but how you've overcome it to achieve the expertise that you have now in whatever courses, et cetera. But make sure that you explain it a little bit. You don't have to go into all detail. We certainly don't want to know all of that. We want to know enough that will allow us to say this was a significant challenge that they had, and they have overcome that by doing X, Y, Z. So we do say, please disclose anything like that you feel comfortable with. And remember, this application is private. So you're sending it, 2 people will read it most likely, but nobody else.
And then just one more question. Do having extracurriculars that are related to your major look more impressive than having other types of extracurriculars?
I'm not sure that would be the case. I mean, I think having all different kinds gives you a well-rounded student. So if you are only doing things for your major, then you're losing the benefit of getting engaged in other areas. So I don't want to say it will hurt you, that it's better if you have more, but I would say that it makes you a more well-rounded individual with more and better experiences to address. So once you get to the university, you'll be able to reflect on those kinds of experiences that you've had, because you're going to be thrown into all kinds of different things at the university that you may or may not have experienced. So doing as much as you can while you're there will allow you to prepare for your tenure at the university.
So yeah, the only thing is I would say people are asking if I'm the president of a club or organization, extracurricular. I would say put that into consideration, that it's like being an athlete. If you show up and, go to classes, and everything else, look at, like, if you're a football player, like lifting weights and eating better, like look at all those extracurricular activities in that sense. Yeah, it's going to help you, when you're applying on your game day and your classes and everything else. So all of those things help, but it's not going to replace bad grades. Like, so you could say, well, I was president of 6 clubs and I did all this different stuff, but if you have a 2.0 GPA, it's not going to replace anything. It's going to enhance it. And
Yeah.
you could add on that a little bit as well.
I think, I worked in admissions for almost 20 years. So I know a little bit about all of that because I've read thousands of applications. And I will say, with regard to the leadership question, a lot of people say, well, if I just say that I'm the president of the honors club, will that help me? And I'm like, saying that you're the president of the honors club is going to do nothing for you unless you talk about what you did while you were in that position. So saying that you're president or leaders in these areas only means something if you can say, and this is what I did, or what I learned, or what it taught me, or whatever it is, but here's the experience that I got from it to become a leader. It is important to clarify what the experiences do for you in this process, not just the fact that you might have 20 or 30 different kinds of experiences. The breadth and depth is important. It's not how many, it's what you did within some of those that are really important. So you can say, I was involved in 12 different organizations, but let me tell you about these 2, and then go into more depth. That's more meaningful and will be more beneficial to you than if you just try to throw out numbers and all of that.
This is another question about PIQs. Is it okay to answer the PIQs in storytelling way? I've been told by a counselor to do an essay and get admitted that it's written in a way that's more engaging.
So there was a young man who grew up in blah, 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 blah. It's funny because the most important thing is to get the message across. And if you do that in a different kind of a way by telling a story, make sure that it's complete and make sure that it means something. What you want to do is, as we said earlier, be your authentic self. If that's how you talk and that's how you interact, sure. But if you're trying to make up a story that makes you look different and better and more unique, it's not going to work. It's really about responding to the question at hand and doing it in a way that paints you in a particular, puts you in a particular position in terms of explaining what it is you're trying to get the word across. It's very clear. And when I read applications, it was before the PIQ, so it was a personal statement. And it was very clear when you see a student answering a question, and then you see that another part of that question, that response is written by someone else because the language changes, the usage of words change. I mean, as Gary said, don't go to a thesaurus and try to impress us with all of these great words. Use the language that you're comfortable with, and make sure that the answer you're providing about that question is clear enough. And so what I say is, start writing it now if you haven't already done that. Put it away for a few days, come back to it 2 or 3 or 4 different times. Give yourself a few days in between, because you're going to start remembering different things that happened. Share it with people who know you, because they might say, oh, you didn't include this. And share it with family and people who know you. Share it with someone who doesn't know you, because when you read it, it's clear to you, but because you've been writing it. But when someone who reads it just across the board, they can tell you what, I'm not sure what this means. So it's always good to share it. And that's why you need a month or so to write this, because it gives you time to perfect it in a way that will be the most effective way of conveying what it is you're trying to say about you and your experiences.
All right, we can ask only a couple more questions because
Yes,
we
you
have to get
can.
because well, I have to go to work. So um was it been some people want to ask about film and television and transferring is film and television and how competitive it is.
It is incredibly competitive. They take probably, I don't even know what the numbers, like 15 to 20, maybe 30 students total in as undergrad, as transfer students. So it's extremely competitive, and students are required to submit a supplemental application, which means that they're looking at your writing, they're looking at a number of other kinds of things. It is important for you to go online and look at their requirements. They have a very good website that gives you detailed information about exactly what their portfolio looks like and when the dates are. They also have, they've already had some, but they will have additional open houses and webinars to so that you can meet with their staff to find out more about their requirements. It is like nursing. It is a tough major, and it is one of the tops in the country and a very small major. So therefore, it's very competitive.
We have a couple questions about people wondering how they can get more experience within their major, specifically biology. Are there any resources for new transfer students to get experience like in labs or with different programs?
So there's the Undergraduate Research Center at UCLA. Once you start, that you can become a part of. There are also specific majors have faculty that have research opportunities as well. The best thing for you to do right now is to start thinking about the areas that you're interested in and to contact faculty members who are teaching those courses or doing that kinds of research. You can reach out to the URC, Undergraduate Research Center at UCLA, and tell them that you would be, you will be starting in a year, and you want to make sure that if there's a newsletter for you to be involved in or some way to get information about their opportunities, that you do so. But there are also advisors for each of the majors that have information about opportunities to engage in research. I would also say to you to look at your own campus resources, some of the faculty that you're involved in doing research. Also, maybe if you are interested in medical school, looking at ways to engage by doing volunteering stuff or so forth.
Yeah, and we've done workshops on summer programs. There are summer programs at UCLA. There's a bunch of those programs, and we did a whole talk on that a couple of weeks ago, and we post stuff on our social media all the time. We have a lot of questions. Some of them are repetitive, but I really have to go, and if I leave, I have to close the Zoom.
No, I have to go too. So
I'm really sorry that, but I think most of the questions got answered. I think the key of this is that if you're going to California Community College, there is a UCLA rep. And again, we put that link on there. And so put it in again, and I'm going to leave this on for a few minutes, and you could look at that website and download all the stuff. They're probably the best people that you could contact. They know your campus, they know the programs, they know your courses, and they can be a big help to you. And so they could answer all of those questions. And those personal questions as well.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. You've done some amazing work, Madeline and Jubin and all.